So I began by simply writing down elements that I thought I might include in the illustration. You'll see them up here. Batman, the penguin, a gargoyle, bats, penguins, a cemetery, probably in a snowstorm, I thought. Maybe the skyline of Gotham, the city where Batman lives. And I'm thinking about how I'm going to organize these elements on the page to create an interesting composition. A successful composition will keep the viewer's eye engaged, so it's very important. And composition just refers to the arrangement of these elements on the page to create the whole illustration. After I've figured out some of the elements that I'm going to include, I do multiple of these scaled sketches. You'll see this is 10 centimeters tall by 25 centimeters wide. And I'm just trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to stage my subjects. This is the last sketch I did, and it is the one that is most similar to the final piece. But you'll even see that some of these decisions were later changed because it's really an ongoing process. So this is my representation of Batman. And this is the gargoyle. This is the cemetery in the middle, the character known as the penguin. And these ovals here simply represent penguins. So this process, it's meant to be fast and loose. I'm not worried about specific details right now. I'm just trying to get the placement of my composition. You'll also see that I've made marks around the page and I've quartered it. This is so I have some general idea of where these elements are going to go on the page when I draw the final piece, so that when I scale it up, I have more guidelines and I don't skew the proportions. So I'll move on to the next image here. So this was the final drawing before I was ready to start painting. And I'm going to point out some conscious decisions that I was making while arranging this composition. This upward angle right here of the gargoyle meets the downward gaze of Batman, and they kind of intersect somewhere around here. This diagonal of his gaze, if you look and you follow, it meets this angel statue in the cemetery. And even her arm at this angle and her hand leads into a diagonal, which leads to the brim of his hat. So the brim of the hat leads up into these penguins. And then you'll see this penguin's face is directed back into the illustration, maybe through the penguin's face, through the cigarette, through the smoke, and into the gargoyle's face. And I'm hoping that it will come back into the illustration here, the viewer's eye. The first thing anybody recognizes in an illustration are faces. And second to faces are hands. And that is because we use these things to communicate. So I'm using faces and hands to direct the viewer's eye through the illustration. So this is the example of what I'm hoping will happen for the viewer's eye. Start up here, maybe start through here, and meet and follow and come around back in until you do this all over again. And what I'm hoping is that I've trapped the viewer's eye here to continue to look at the image. As an artist, we spend hours creating these illustrations and paintings and drawings. And if our composition is unsuccessful, a viewer may only look at the image for a few seconds, which is not a lot of time. Ideally, would like to get the viewer to pay attention to our work for a few minutes. So that's what we're trying to do with a composition that captures the viewer's eye. One more note about this. You'll notice the mark at the top of the page, which represents the center of the page. The vanishing point of the perspective of the cemetery here, the way to describe this, all of the lines lead to this vanishing point. That is perspective. I put that vanishing point off center to this side intentionally so that I would have more of this side of the cemetery to look at. You see more three-dimensionality because the vanishing point is set to this side. I felt that this penguin and these penguins were pretty dominant and bold. And so in an effort to balance out the illustration, I moved this vanishing point so that you could see more of this side of the cemetery. I also made sure that the gravestones on this side of the cemetery were taller and more interesting to look at, adding elements to look at on this side of the page. So hopefully that results in some balance. Okay, so looking at individual elements of the illustration, I'm going to talk about the use of reference and how to use it properly. Using reference does not mean copying images you find online. Unless you take the perfect photo yourself, then you can copy a photo, but otherwise you're just trying to get ideas and use it into your illustration. You want your references to fit your illustration and your perspectives. You don't want your illustration to be determined by the references that you can find, because you'll rarely find photos in the perfect perspective or setting. So starting with Batman and the Gargoyle, I found a few images of gargoyles online and chose a few I liked and blended some of their features together. You'll see the ribbing on the necks. I kind of liked that. This wing here, I stylized and made much bigger. And this Batman, if you can believe it, is actually me, sort of. I'm not going to show you the reference photo for that. That's embarrassing. But that is me posed on my bed with my phone camera on the ground. And actually, my 4-year-old son was kind enough to take the photo for me. So I always encourage students to use reference. I don't expect anyone to draw everything out of their head. Use reference. It will be a lot easier to create the art that's in your mind. Something fun I do in class to emphasize this point is that at the beginning of the year, I have students in class draw an ordinary object, something that everyone is familiar with, and I have them draw it from memory. And then it's fun, we compare their drawings to a photo of the real object, and it's always amazing to see the details that everyone forgets. We think we know what things look like, but reference gives us the details and often corrects our memories. Let's see. Okay, moving on to the cemetery. These are my references for the cemetery. I knew I wanted the hazy gray day of a snowstorm. And I loved this image here of the wet, clumpy snow sticking to the sides of the gravestones. And then this was the reference for the angel statue that you saw in the background. I'll show you the drawing. And then the painting, and that's how that turned out. Maybe important to note here that I was using acrylic paint, the same supplies that the students have access to in our classroom. And I started painting the cemetery first because it's in the background. Generally, it's easier to start from the background and work your way towards the foreground because you can simply paint over the background objects if you don't stay in the lines or if there's something that you need to correct and edit. All right, so next I painted these penguins in the background on the right-hand side here, keeping with the idea of working back to front. Talking about reference, it's interesting how much you actually learn when you research your reference. I knew I wanted penguins that were only black and white because I knew I wanted this painting to be warm and cool grays mixed with black and white. And what I found was that many penguins actually have some color, like yellow feathers or orange beaks. So eventually I found this particular penguin, and it's called an African penguin. And truth be told, the African penguin has a little bit of pink above the eye normally. But this brings me to the point, every artist has what's called an artistic license. This license allows the artist to break some rules in order to create a better piece of art. So this is where I used my artistic license, and I left the pink out. And then I found, even with this character, the penguin, I found myself researching how to wear a monocle, something I never figured I'd research, but I wanted to make sure that I illustrated that accurately. And here, the completed image. Pretty happy with how it turned out. You'll see in the final image here that I decided to eliminate my ideas of the bats. There's no Gotham skyline in the background. I thought I might include it back here. And I didn't include the character, the penguin's umbrella. I thought that would close things off too much. One more note about the use of color. I mentioned that I wanted this to be warm and cool grays mixed with black and white, but there was a time when I was considering adding bits of color to help move the viewer's eye around the page. The thing to be aware of here, though, is if I put color in one place, that place is immediately going to draw the most attention, especially against a grayscale background. So when introducing a color or a new color into an already colorful painting, the general rule is you must put it in 2 other places so that you have a total of 3. Ideally, you'd space these bits of color out in a triangular position or a diagonal composition to avoid being static. So originally, I thought I might make these rockets behind the penguins have red stripes, like a candy stripe. And this would actually be keeping accurate with their portrayal in the 1992 movie Batman Returns. But I wasn't convinced I had enough meaningful places to put more red throughout the illustration. I suppose I could have put red flowers in the cemetery, and I did think about that. And if I was going to, I thought about what flower choice would be the best. I thought maybe poinsettias would tell a bit more of a story about the wintry season. But I just never felt like I had enough spots and enough reasons to do it. So ultimately, I chose against it. So that's it. That's my painting from start to finish. That's some of the things I was thinking about in terms of reference and composition and color. So I think the best way to think about that is if you imagine that you are the student and that painting was yours, not mine. These are the things that I would have been telling you to think about and getting you to recognize within your own work. So yes, so thank you for joining. And I just kind of wanted to take a moment to let students know that this is the type of attention and that you'll receive from us. We're very excited to work with you. We want to help you get into the college of your choice and ultimately work in your field of art of your choosing. And for students that maybe aren't considering going to art school and making a career out of it, but they enjoy it and want to learn more, you'll receive the same level of dedication from all of us. I myself make myself available in class, outside of class. I really do the best I can to make sure that I'm available to the students whenever they need me. So we hope that students come. We know they'll enjoy what we have to offer, and we're excited to meet them, and we look forward to working with them.